Well, compared to the next place, I would say this has a really high recovery potential. Okay, as far as in general, you know, I'd say probably medium to high potential of recovery for this. So if I were prioritizing, you know, where to spend money, I think you'll get the most benefit for spending your money in a place like this, where you know there are some perennials that can respond. And you don't just have gigantic dust clouds blowing away if you kill the cheatgrass.
Are you expecting it to take about 3 years before you really see a change, a noticeable change?
If we get good control from the application that I put out yesterday, I would expect to see greater than 90% cheatgrass removal in some of these plots by next spring. Now, unfortunately, 3 years later, we might start to see cheatgrass come back. We don't know that for sure, but this way we can track it. We'll come out, you know, over the next few years and take pictures, and you guys can kind of watch and see what happens. I have had fall pre-emergent applications with a number of different herbicides that we've got in this trial where I've had 99% control the following year. So if it works really good. You can't always expect that, but when you get those results, it's really impressive.
So your odds should increase by using 3 or 4 herbicides then.
Well, Dennis, I hope we get at least one of these plots that looks really good. I hope so.
Rick and I were talking this. Steve, do you have any change of grazing, or will this be grazed right after that, or do you have any plans to switch
right
things
now,
up?
no, it'll be left itis.
Okay. So that won't affect the...
How much should you get in the ground, your herbicide, you think?
Well, ideally, I would have the intended rates at the soil surface. I don't know that I got that.
You have to apply extra to be sure that you get enough.
Well, I applied with the recommended rates.
Well, if you got more ground cover though, you're going to get less contact with the soil.
You do, and I agree. But if you start bumping up a lot of rates too high, and let's say I got better penetration than I thought I did through the canopy, then I could have negative impacts.
I see, yeah.
And the rates that show up on labels, most of those rates are developed in situations like this. I spend a lot of my time going around spraying herbicides and different things, and the data that I provide to the chemical companies contribute to their building of those labels. So they're not in just some greenhouse where you've got a little cheatgrass growing by itself. I mean, they're usually pretty spot on. There are instances where you can do everything by the book. You can follow every direction that you think, and it just doesn't work the way you want it to. And sometimes the stars are just misaligned or something. But there's a lot of research that goes into the development of those labels. And sometimes that's why those darn herbicides are so expensive when they first come out too, because they invest a lot of money up front.
And when you apply it like this here, you probably are able to be accurate enough that you don't get overlap, right? You're not going to end up with, you know, doubling your rate, because... No, it's pretty accurate.
Aerial,
when you get in these large spots, strip things.
Right.
Do you use something to color the chemical so you can see where you sprayed?
You know, I don't.
I know some people, I've heard that's a good idea.
If I were doing it for management, I would. I probably would, just because that way you don't get skips, you don't double. For these, in most cases, I can see my little flags, and my area is clearly defined. That's one more thing that I've got to add to each bottle that I mix. So I just don't usually do that. You'll notice there is some blue dye around. I just sprayed some water with blue dye in it for those little sheets that I showed you guys in that presentation to look at how much was getting to the soil surface. I usually don't for research purposes. And I don't think aerial applicators do, but oftentimes what aerial guys do is did somebody come from Ag Flyers here today? You guys are GPS connected, and you know exactly where you're spraying and all that stuff, aren't you?
Yeah, we're within anywhere 18 inches to 3 feet GPS wise.
Okay, they're high tech.
It's not an exact science, but it's
Yeah, so in those cases, they probably wouldn't be able to see blue dye anyway. But if you're ground applying, I would say because of that rate, I would say somewhat lack of rate forgiveness. If you're driving around with an ATV or if you're backpacking, calibrate. I mean, so many people want to just mix herbicide and go kill things, and you can kill a lot of things, including the things that you don't want to kill. So total solution here, I applied at 20 gallons.
For an airplane wouldn't do 20.
You guys are 5 usually?
No, it depends on the label.
Okay.
Anywhere from 1 to 2 to 5.
Okay.
So would it be better with 20 gallons or 5?
Well, if we're talking about getting it through this litter and stuff, 20 is going to carry it farther down. It is. So there is some difference in the amount of carrier. I mean, I would think with 20 gallons, I probably got most of everything down to where it needed to be.
How much
Steve.
rain would you need after you?
To activate things, so typically if we would get a good quarter to a half-inch of rain,
Within,
it'll stay pretty good. Within 2 weeks would be ideal. I've had plots where I didn't get rain until a little bit later than that, and we still had pretty good
and if
results.
you don't get the rain,
Some chemicals like Plateau I know can actually break down through sunlight. If it just lays right on the surface and we don't get rain to carry it down, then potentially it could reduce effectiveness because some of that chemical is going to break down and the active ingredient is going to deteriorate. So like everything else with agriculture, we'll pray for just the right amount of rain. I'd say we pray for rain, but folks in North Dakota are a lot of times praying for dry, I think. So, May.
I have another question about your herbicides. How selective are each of the herbicides? Like, for example, I know glyphosate kills everything. What about the other ones? Are they just specifically for grass, or what do they do for all things?
So I know, let's see, I haven't done a lot of work with Cantor yet. I know both Matrix and Plateau will remove things like these annual mustards as well, which I think is a benefit. They're an annoyance anyway. At Plateau, imazapic is actually non-selective. If you get to high enough rates, it'll kill any plant. So it's kind of managing like, in a way, glyphosate or Roundup. If you go at low enough rates, even with Roundup, you can increase its selectivity. It won't kill these big, robust plants, but it'll kill the smaller ones. So typically in something like this with blue grama, needle and thread, there's probably some sandberg bluegrass hiding in here. All of those should stand up fairly well to all of these herbicides. Sagebrush is good with Plateau. It's not bothered at all at the rates we would be using for cheatgrass control. There has been some indication of decrease in forb diversity in places that have been treated with Plateau. And my guess is that you might see that with some of the other herbicides as well. And typically some of those forbs are your annual forbs that have to come back from seed each year, because it's going to affect those newly emerging seedlings.
How does it affect the microbes and bacteria and things like that in the soil?
It depends. I don't know a lot about it. I know that most herbicides are organic compounds. So microbes can actually use some of these herbicides in the soil as a food source. And so it can actually, in some cases, stimulate certain portions of the soil microbes. In other cases, it may reduce other portions of the soil microbial community. But that's about as far as I can speculate on that. There's not a whole lot of people that, well, I'm not familiar with a lot of literature that addresses herbicide impacts on soil microbial communities. One of the things that there is more literature on is invasive plants can really alter soil microbial communities. And so that would in some ways complicate that, because you may be working with an altered soil microbial community to begin with. But no doubt that has some kind of impact. I mean, they're living things, and we're putting some kind of stressor on them. Okay, so we think that maybe we're going to have some luck here. Okay, Dick says yeah. All right.
Well, you need rain, right?
We need some rain.
Lots of love.
We'll see if that happens or not. Okay, so this is our high recovery potential site. If you guys are okay with stretching your legs just a little bit, we're going to go down the train of trucks. I don't think there's a car in the bunch. Good job. And then we're gonna drop off and go look at what I'm gonna say is a tougher site. I say a site with less recovery potential just with one method. So, and maybe we'll just go look at it. I don't think we need to go over how to do a transect again. All right, we'll go down there and look at that. So we've got the same setup here. We've got 5 plots, 4 different herbicide treatments. They're in a different order, so we re-randomized to be scientific and everything, right? You guys have data for 4 plots on your... Now this is, I called it the feed ground because we were thinking that maybe they used to feed cows down here. Okay?
Yeah.
So, thing that jumps out immediately is we've got 2 major weed problems potentially to deal with, right? We've got a lot of tumble mustard and some other annual mustards, and we've got a cheatgrass understory. Okay? If I look at basal cover, I really don't see a whole lot that is attractive on the data sheet. I'm not seeing any, we didn't hit any perennials, and that was over a span of 180, 200 feet going through this. Right now, one thing that you'll see there is some sand sage. Our transect just happened not to go over top of them. There are a few included in the plots. Now, I have been digging around out here a little bit. There are a few perennials in here. We just didn't happen to hit any because when you've got a point that big, your probability of hitting something is pretty low when you go over this large of an area. One of the things that I noticed down here, and I actually noticed it after we sprayed, so that was something that was bad on my part, is so we've moved. How far have we gone? Not even a quarter of a mile. There was no emergence up there. We've got a tremendous litter layer down here, and that is a cheatgrass seedling, still in the 1 leaf stage, but it is already, what is that, 3 inches, 2.5 inches tall. Right?
You need to be spraying.
So if we were doing post-emergent, which would mean that I should have had some surfactant in the mix down here, which I did not because I mixed up there and then walked down here, that will probably negatively impact the results a little bit. There's not a lot of them that have emerged yet, but I think we've got a pretty serious microclimate that's going on down in there. If we get a little bit of moisture, it's going to trap it. It's not going to dry off as fast. That may have something to do with it. Different soil type potentially. So, what do you guys think about this one? What do we expect to see?
You use the 20 gallons or ounces of water?
20 gallons per acre. Yep, total solution.
There's so much surface of the mustard that's going to be absorbing it. There's a lot of surface area there to absorb.
There's a lot. Now, I think one thing there's not a tremendous litter layer that's built up. It's almost all standing vertical type stuff. There's a litter layer on the ground, but standing out here, I can look down and I can see the soil in some cases. So I think we'll get some chemical down to the soil surface. Now, let's.
Which had more blue?
More blue?
The 2 you had on the
So this was the less blue.
less blue.
Right, so we did have less herbicide, less solution reach the soil than up there.
Okay.
So there was more interception. Timing might be an issue.
Early. If you gone in April, you might have been able to take care of both your problems.
So the mustard we might have taken care of if we were in here in the spring.
Mustard's early, and so is cheatgrass, so you could have went in with some Roundup early to take care of this.
Okay.
But if you would have had some rain this fall, this mustard would have been started up too.
Potentially. So do we have to really worry a whole lot about non-target damage?
No.
Okay.
No non-target kid.
So let's assume that we get really good kill, right? What are we going to end up with here?
Bare ground.
Potentially bare ground. So this might be a situation where, yeah, if we find that we get good till or good kill, good control, potentially we could come back and talk about seeding. We'll see. This is kind of a test and see what we can do, and you guys will get to track it through time as well.
One other thing that you're going to have to think about is that you might have a seed bank from your blue grama or any other perennials that are there too that might take over where they can take hold.
Potentially, yeah, potentially we've got a legacy of something good in the soil too. We won't know that until we get out here. So, ideally we wouldn't have very many situations like this. It is what it is. It's not uncommon. There are sacrifice areas on every ranch, and it's just figuring out a way to work our way out of this within the time and budgetary constraints that we have to deal with. Then that's kind of what we're stuck with doing.
Brian, when do these cure and drop their seed usually?
They're kind of opening now. I know we were out here the other day and I was just covered with mustard seeds.
Okay.
They'll start to dry out mid to late summer, and I don't think as a rangeland weed that our suite of annual mustards get the respect they deserve.
Yeah.
Because these little lepidiums, those desert alyssums and things like that, they really compete for early moisture almost the same way that cheatgrass does. And you can drive along roadsides and just see places that are just solid yellow as far as you can see. But they're kind of the unknown, they don't get quite the respect that some of the other weeds do. Especially when we're talking about forage production.
What is this?
Rachel.
I'm too far, I can't hear you. The wind. It must be the wind. No, just kidding.
Sand drop seed.
Okay.
So was it in the roadside or?
No, it's in here.
Okay. So maybe we'll see some sand drop seed if we get some control. If there are no more questions, we can tromp back up the hill and call it good.